we've covered a whole spectrum of manners of technology and how they're influencing commerce and society and everyday life. And today we're wrapping up with the NBN to look at connectivity and what the NBN has done and changed in terms of the landscape of digital business. Before we do jump into that, my co-host who's out on the road and at the airport looking to take off into the future, Victor is with us. Victor Purton, welcome.
Oh, thank you very much, Guy. And given that I'm on an iPhone and there's quite a bit of aviation noise behind me, I will do what we always have to do in one of these events and ask Andrew the question that each of us thinks about each time we meet. What makes you optimistic? So, Andrew, tell us, what makes you optimistic?
Victor, for me, it's I quite enjoy life and the way it actually takes us into new places. But it's the ideas that you hear as you move around, starting to talk to different communities and people, that you just go, wow. You know, you've got a handle on what's happening today, and you know, there's a certain amount of resilience that's in this country. You know, I've been doing quite a number of events, and those ideas just blow me away, Victor. It's those concepts that just keep us taking us forward, but also I think actually make our lives a lot better as well. When you start hearing about how people will apply innovation and technology to really boost and communicate much better. So it's a wonderful thing.
It's fantastic. And as I said before we came on yesterday, the Governor-General, you know, joined school kids all the way from Denver to Denmark, sharing what makes him. And it was like all the kids were in his lounge room, and just the power of the technology. So, Andrew, you really, you know, you bring us the future and you're touching the future. And I think you've got a bit of a presentation to share with us today.
Indeed. So let me just share my screen. And hopefully, oops, share, there we go.
And I will go on mute so the airline sound reduces.
Okay, so can everyone see the screen there? Great. So what I want to do is just give you a little bit of a background on where we're at with the NBN, talk a little bit about NBN's response to COVID, and how innovation really did apply itself in this environment in a quite an amazing way. You know, I use a line, bandwidth facilitates innovation, and I believe it to be very, very true when it comes to what people can start to use. The bandwidth that we've rolled out and apply it to their business, but also in their lives. How we're engaging business, and we're seeing business being empowered with choice and information. I'll touch a little bit on the government's announcement about Fibre for Business, because I think that is incredibly important as we move into these next few years and what it makes available to business. And then a couple of quick points about what is the difference between a residential internet service and what is a business grade service and how businesses are using that. And I'll talk about our IT advisor program and why the NBN is working with partners and IT advisors and vendors in this community to basically get the message out there about what you can use the bandwidth for. So let me quickly just touch on where we're at and why this was an important moment in time, particularly as we were going through the lockdown and so on. But so as of June, we were about 95% through the rollout, which means that 95% of premises in the country were ready for service. You know, what we were seeing, and if you look at the top corner there, we were actually experiencing 20,000 new business premise connections a month. And basically, you know, so the demand for NBN was still very, very high, but it accelerated quite quickly as soon as everyone went into lockdown. A lot of businesses that weren't sure about going over to the NBN were very, very concerned about, you know, well, how do I go about this? And the area that I work in is basically about engaging IT partners and their advisors on assisting business. The key point I want to make about this particular slide is that, gee, we were fortunate that at that time, we had quite a significant footprint of NBN out there. So as people went into lockdown and the country went off-site and basically online, we were able to implement that sort of change and actually implement the NBN services to cater for remote working. Look, the NBN for business isn't just internet, right? So one thing we certainly found is that, you know, the NBN affects voice, it affects your internet for sure, but it also affects data networking. And there's probably been 4 compelling events, 4 catalysts for change out there that I've certainly seen over the last 3 years. The first was the rollout. People needed to make a decision, and that decision was around, what do I do with my voice? What do I do with my internet? Can I use it for networking? Another catalyst to this is the customers, business customers particularly, were saying, what can I use this for? And this is where I saw the IT community really roll in over the top of that and say, well, here's some options for you to use. How can we make you more efficient and actually build some resilience into your business? And that became critical as soon as the lockdowns kicked in. SD-WAN, I'll use the technology term, it's SD-WAN. It's about putting intelligent routers to the edge of networks. Another game changer out there where small business customers with branches, and Ben, you would know this, you've got branches in different locations in different areas at the end of the day. This is another game changer where businesses could get and network their branch infrastructure and get basically enterprise grade networking off the back end of intelligent routers. And that is making some significant changes in how business is now starting to build efficiency. I think the third catalyst was definitely COVID, and I'll talk to that and what we had to do in that time frame. And lastly, it's this fibre announcement and the real uplift in the availability of bandwidth based on a fibre platform for business. And it's not just fibre for business. Next year, we'll also start seeing fibre for high bandwidth for residential services as well. We're really going to start moving into a 21st century, I believe, environment when it comes to the fibre technologies that are going to be made available. Just change the slide. So what did we experience and what did we see? Now, look, there was a natural act happening here, a bit of a natural effect when the NBN was rolling out. We would survey different towns and regions after we'd cut over. And if I look at Albury-Wodonga, I think we declared Albury and Albury-Wodonga at around 2016. And most customers and businesses in that area had around a year and a half, 18 months to make their transition across to the NBN. So you've been on it for a little while, since probably about the end of 2018. And what we did see and what we have seen when we go back into those communities and compare them to communities that hadn't been cut over was this extraordinary effect of people starting to utilize the bandwidth to go online. People were reassessing and using this as an opportunity to reassess what they were doing today and what they might be able to use it for. Women in business did start to climb through as people started saying, well, I can actually work from home or from an environment. I can be in a virtual environment and actually market and sell myself much more effectively. The thing that we found with COVID and the lockdown, and I'll quickly touch on this now, is that it made a massive reassessment on what the norms are today. The first couple of assessments were made is that businesses, the quick realization is that we are living in an environment where we need to be very agile, and we need to start building resilience into business. And having everything sitting on site is probably not the best outcome. So as people moved into a remote working and working from home, people needed to reassess basically, what is my network like? I now need to incorporate home working. And that creates a whole bunch of other questions that need to come around security. How do I secure my information? Where does it reside? And oh my goodness, my first cut over to the NBN, if I can call it out, we saw a lot of businesses, and in fact, a lot of essential services, medical centers, had been cut over to like for like off ADSL to NBN. So where they would have had an ADSL 1 service, a 12 meg service, or a 24 meg service, they were cut over to 12 and 25 meg services when, in fact, there was capacity out there they could have utilized. So as COVID hit, a couple of things happened very quickly. Businesses very quickly realized the difference between a residential and business grade service, and the fact that they were now operating in a very different space, needed some additional capacity, but capacity wasn't initially in place. So we saw lots of upgrades occur to 50 meg and 100 meg services as customers basically realized, oops, we need more capacity and we need to make some changes and start moving our information off-site into a secure environment such as a data center and so on. Bandwidth facilitates innovation. The other part of it is that a reaction from us was that we increased the capacity of the network by 40%. To cater for this movement of peak back into the business hours of the day as kids and educators were starting to work offline. And we also found that a number of essential services were working on very low bandwidth and needed SLAs in place as well. So we needed to build that out, implement a back-to-back arrangement with the telcos to facilitate us knowing that this is an essential service requiring a 12-hour response time. And I might just add, businesses became very aware that their services were residential, in other words, a best endeavors environment. If I can give you a quick difference on what we call how we differentiate business and residential. A residential service, if I can give you the analogy, is, can you imagine that a business is a person that wants to go to a pool and swim laps, but they go to that pool on a hot summer's day during the school holiday, and it's busy, it's packed. The internet is the equivalent of a public pool on a hot summer's day with lots of people in that pool. And you want to do laps, you need an uninterrupted space for mission critical stuff like voice, video, and key applications. You're not going to get that in a public pool. You need to have your own swim lane. So we have services out there that have their own swim lane. It's a 1-to-1 or 1-to-3 contention, depending on how the telcos make it, but you've got the capacity to move your information up and down. So you don't get interruptions. You don't have a situation where packet loss occurs and you're really there saying, oh my God, I'm sharing this environment. So everyone moves offline. Educators are now working from home. Kids are working from home. Business hours became the public space. And in fact, a lot of businesses were sending stuff after hours, which was always peak. So customers were coming back to us and we were going back to their IT partners and we were talking to the telcos about, let's get the word out about the difference between a service graded for business, very low contention, and the other part of it is a residential grade service. The other part, and I'll quickly touch on this because I am going to talk to uploads and downloads. If I can just put this in your mind, downloads is what you experience. When I download something, that's something I see. Upload and having good bandwidth for upload is what your customer experiences. Right? It's what your customer sees and feels. So if your information isn't moving effectively out of your organization and being communicated more broadly on high bandwidth services, then you're in a situation where your customer experience isn't going to be optimized. So we're keen on making sure that we've got symmetrical services, and this new fiber initiative allows some significant bandwidth for business. You don't have to buy the lot, right? At the beginning, you can grow steadily and dial it up, but it gives you a platform for symmetrical. So end game was that we saw many customers cut over to the NBN in a very quick way, but we also saw a significant effect. Look, I use this slide quite a lot when I talk about transformation and, the catalyst that occurs when a business customer needs to make a decision. And no one likes change. It can be considered costly, but let me just put it in a couple of ways for you. Many customers' legacy services weren't cheap. All right, so many customers had, DSL services and ISDN 10s and 20s. But what we have seen with the rollout of the NBN, and this is, Victor, to your point, what makes me optimistic is that bandwidth has become much more cost effective. Right? Customers can get access to 100 meg services for download, and in fact, can have 100 meg upload as well if they want to start as an entry point, at costs that were much lower than a year ago or 3 years ago or 4 years ago because competition entered the market. Competition is good. But what it also meant is that where I was running on a very skinny pipe, say a DSL service before, and I wanted to start saying, how do I move my information into a safe space, back it up, provide a disaster recovery plan in there and move my information or move my people if there's a disaster recovery and work from elsewhere. Build a network of my branches, and there are a lot of businesses in regional towns that have multiple branches in different towns, and networking is critical for them. But they couldn't afford it because the bandwidth was too high and the networking costs were too high. So we saw the introduction of SD-WAN, where intelligent routers allow you to use the internet and some uncontended networking services alongside each other. So our word for it is TC4 is internet, TC2 is a business grade say one-to-one service. You get 2 services in there and put a smart router in there, and all of a sudden I've got mission critical infrastructure services running and alongside good internet. The next step for business is to think about what they've got. This is an assessment point. Our IT partners help with that transition. And, I mentioned that ideas make me optimistic. The use of technology makes me optimistic because I see this as becoming the game changer for Australia. We adapt very quickly to it. So customers can now start moving into a space where they can think about storage. I'll give you 2 examples. Leading Edge just made an announcement, I think it was only last week on Friday, that they're looking to put a data center in Albury-Wodonga. All right. Now, I was in Gosford and they're also putting one in Newcastle. They're putting, I might have the number wrong here, but it's a significant amount. I think it's around 60 around the country in regional towns where they're bringing. Now, what is a data center? The data center is basically a secure environment that gives you guaranteed air conditioning, guaranteed electricity, and gives you security for access, right? So customers and businesses, instead of having their service and application sitting in small server rooms, or in some cases closets, can put their stuff in a secure environment where blackouts, right? These guys run on, generators and redundancy and capacity, so that I can now literally move into an online environment and start using things like software as a service if they provide the capacity there as well. And companies like AWISE and others are now starting to talk about putting instances in those data centers so there's less latency when it comes to your communication. Extraordinary stuff. This means there's investments going down as well. And, when I was in Gosford last week, or the week before last, sorry, this whole remote working and this, cutting out commutes. You lose people to universities in the major cities sometimes. The fact is that IP can often stay there. The difference that COVID's made, and Victor mentioned it earlier on, was that we can now start to actually take our IP and live a life alongside our families and in environments where we can share as if we're sitting in a corporate office. This new fibre announcement is also going to facilitate that as well when it comes to capacity. This is really exciting times and really exciting stuff, but we want to empower customers, right? And what I love is that, when you give a customer choice, you give them an opportunity to make a decision. There were very few business providers in the past, and I know that in regional towns, a lot of people were very concerned about moving off their current provider because they've been there forever and a day. Choice is now there where customers can be customers and can actually benchmark and make decisions, because the competition has not only just brought down the price, it's brought other entrants into that space on a basic platform that they provide their services on. There's 2 types of flexibility. One is your bandwidth and choice of business or residential services, so you get that as well. But also the flexibility to implement applications and implement change into your business that actually helps you live and work in a pandemic world. Now, I'll make one thing here, and something I mentioned to some businesses that I spoke to at a roundtable. People have a disaster recovery plan. Now, how many customers have actually implemented and actually written down a pandemic plan? Now, we've been through the worst of the pandemic in this country, and God, we're lucky for, that we've had the sort of commitment from people and government to help us through that. But a pandemic plan is something that you need to have in place and share as your disaster recovery plan. And South Australia is a classic example of a state that went through clear run, then all of a sudden shut down. And you guys in Albury-Wodonga are on the cutting edge of that when you look at state border closures. So what I ask for, and when I talk to businesses, start creating a pandemic plan. This isn't a once-off. It can and will happen again. Share it with your IT partner, and then actually think about how you might implement that from the point of view of pandemic plan, disaster recovery planning, but also how do you build resilience into your business and utilize bandwidth? And this is a bandwidth-driven outcome, because it'll give you the ability to protect your organization, but also communicate more effectively, and again, move into new markets, and what we saw with the NBN effect. Reliability, the fibre rollout, it's a different, copper's been in the ground for over 100 years, right? It's an investment that was made many, many years ago. Fibre is really the product that actually is going to increase capability and capacity going forward. And putting this and making it available to business is making a significant thing. I'll get to the point. The announcement was made by the Minister for Communications at the end of September that the government was going to invest, you know, I might just say, my mother's so proud, you know, I actually work for the government, guys, you know, a significant amount of money in fibre for business. The why? Because we had our platform and footprint pretty much rolled out. So extending fibre off a footprint that's pretty much rolled out, nodes were all active and all the rest of it, makes it much more affordable than rolling fibre from the very beginning, right? And it's part of an investment strategy for next year to stimulate the economy as well and build capacity for business to grow on. The key point here is that 90% of our NBN footprint will have a zero cost build for fibre. In fact, it's 97% of the fixed footprint, right? 90% of the footprint, zero cost build. A business says, I'd like to get high capacity fibre into my business, and I know there's demand for it. I've seen it. I've seen people asking for it. That is a game changer. The second part of this is these fibre zones that were announced, where we've got 240 zones around the country, and particularly in regional towns, where we've declared it to be a CBD pricing zone. So anybody ordering the enterprise Ethernet service in that space, it's the equivalent of me working at North Sydney or in Albury Wodonga or in Wagga or in Geelong or any of these other towns at CBD pricing for this, and it's brought the price of bandwidth quite significantly down. If you go on for a 3-year contract with your provider, we cut out the connection fees and we also provide additional discounts through to the RSPs, which we hope are then passed on. But it's actually brought the rate for 100 service, for example, 100 down, 100 up, with the ability to dial this thing up to near gig. You can build a platform for the future. I am optimistic about that because it means businesses can start building resilience into their organisation off the back end of these sorts of announcements. I've got local council, economic development groups crawling all over us at the moment saying, we want you guys to help us invest. We've got industrial estates and other areas here. We want to set up hubs for communications. You know, we've got great parking at a location. We want to put a high bandwidth service in there so people that don't have good internet at home can go to a location and work as if they're in a corporate office. This is a game changer, right? And the whole of COVID has recalibrated management thinking as well about how people can work online without the worry that are they really working. The fact is that the country's become more productive because there's less of a commute in many cases as well. So let me just continue because I know my time is short. You can check it yourself. We've built up our check your address. So I've used the post office in Albury and the post office in Wodonga as the example. You type in your address on our checker. The 3 key things that come up: no upfront build cost to providers. That's a zero cost build for the enterprise Ethernet service. Our most competitive wholesale pricing, well, gee, that's CBD pricing is the analogy for that one. And if you go for a 3-year contract, there's no other connection fees associated back to the provider. Really worth your while considering it. Engage your IT partner. And remember, you're empowered with choice now. Right? So as a business, you have an opportunity to actually sit back and say, I'd like to get this. How do I go about it? But more importantly, how can I use this bandwidth to actually lift my business from a single site into something that's probably more virtual and an environment where I can communicate and get across borders with my communications and transactions. Another couple of slides. So, oops, entry point. Oh, what happened there? There it is. The 100 really is where it's come down. We actually repriced the 100 bandwidth to the same price as 1010 was. 3 months ago, 1010 was significantly cheaper. We've created a new entry point for the product, and the capacity of this particular solution, enterprise Ethernet, is up to near gig. The reason I don't say gig, there's a little bit of overhead when the modems and the networking starts transacting. It's about 952. But that said, that's a significant amount of capacity, and investments are still going into development of fibre to actually drive more bandwidth up the line as we move forward. It is about supporting regional towns and communities. The Minister of Communications was making another announcement today. I don't know if you guys saw it on the news today, but we are rolling out 1,000 satellite dishes across essential services. We've already rolled out 100, and these will go into rural fire community buildings to help facilitate a better reaction to the things that we're now starting to see with climate change, and that is our reactions to fire. And it's a redundancy capability. If the terrestrial network goes down, our satellite service picks up the game and allows for communication, including an investment in some additional Wi-Fi trucks that we had some of, but they're investing in a number more to get community and Wi-Fi out to communities that have lost comms. Some industry examples, guys. There's great case studies out there. You know, there's a fantastic case study of a real estate agent, a single site. You know, remember I was saying what your customers experience is your upload? Businesses are now starting to develop rich content for their interactions. Any real estate agent is making drone videos and videos at the end of the day of places they're trying to sell. I did a 10-minute video for EduTech that was 740 meg. 740 meg for a 10-minute video. Rich content, though, is the difference between a static view of the world and something that's quite engaging from a customer's perspective. And businesses are now starting to think about, well, how do I communicate more effectively, including the fact that businesses have multiple users online at the same time. Multiple users online. So even video conferencing, 20 staff on a call at one time, it could kill off your voice calls if you don't have enough capacity, right? And it's not your outgoing calls. People make calls on their mobile phones. It's your incoming calls that you really need to protect. That's your transacting environment with a customer. Sales and service. That makes the difference. Stacks of case studies. Go onto our website, talk to your IT partners about getting those case studies and seeing how it applies to your business. So we've brought the product down into the space where small to medium business can get access to high bandwidth on fibre. A great outcome, right? It's a great outcome and worth your consideration. Don't say, you know, if it doesn't fit your business, that's okay, right? But if there's an opportunity for you to do the upgrade, because most of your businesses may have already been out there, then just take it to the next stage. Lastly, our ICT program has been going for about 3 years. We've got 2,000 people certified. They've done fundamentals and have our backup and support. 559 accredited ICT business partners. Ben is one of them. And there are others out there in the Albury-Wodonga area as well, where we've given access to our branding, but we also share information and collateral they can then share with their customers. Guys, all we say is engage, ask, be empowered, right? And be an informed decision maker. And if you need help, just ask and our IT partners will help, or we'll step in there and assist as well. That's the end of the slideshow. Hopefully that's generated enough ideas for the panel.
Andrew, fantastic presentation and a great summary as to what's been going on to change the digital landscape in Australia and how NBN is contributing to that. I think you make a very good point, Andrew, in that connectivity is all about choice, and there are many choices of methods and mediums. And I was interested to hear you talk about the example of people going like for like. Oh, we've got 12 meg, that'll be enough. I think one point I heard in there, and I'd like perhaps Ben, maybe you can, you know, being part of the panel, talk about, is the understanding around speed versus bandwidth. Like everyone says, oh, what's your speed? It's 140. But can you talk, Ben, a little bit about your experience with latency and quality of connection and what you think the business fibre service is going to mean there?
Absolutely. And I mean, look, you know, we've got customers that have spent a lot of money through some prior versions of NBN's like technology choice type facilities. Yeah, and customers, you know, spending 300, 400% what the annual operating expense of the actual service may be just to get it delivered in a different technology, and to see with enterprise Ethernet come in and those build costs be absorbed by NBN cos is amazing. And look, we've seen plenty of excitement from our customers in this last 4 or 5 weeks with discussion around what's going to happen there. But yeah, look, I mean, and every customer has different aspect of how they'll try to measure speed, and speedtest.net must be one of the most hit websites in the world. And, but not always is it the be all and end all to the customer's answers. And customers will come to us and say, oh, but I want to go 5G, or I want to look at alternative paths. We've got customers who Andy spoke about, commercial drone footage guys who are pushing terabytes to the cloud. And these guys, sometimes they're running 3, 4, 5 different types of connections, whether it be 4G, 5G, F-fibre to the node. And these guys will even make purchase decisions. They'll go and buy houses in estates where there already be fibre. So, that's a big thing that comes into the decision making. And look, it's certainly a win for everyone.
Excellent. And so I see that we've got David Sildani with us here today, and David spoke to us about an introduction to 5G and what that was going to mean. What is absolutely true is in the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen that continual explosion of increasing capacity and performance. David, I gather you had a question you wanted to ask around the use of technologies and what's going to be delivered in the future by NBN.
Yeah, I was curious because I never had a chance to work on this project. So I was curious to understand from Andrew, what are the current deployed technologies at NBN? I'm thinking of the passive optical networks, and what are the plans for upgrading those towards 50 gigabit PON networks, if any?
Okay, so the NBN is basically looking at the last mile, David. So and
yes.
forgive me, I'm not a full technologist.
Okay, then I apologize.
It might just be a little bit outside my scope. So I know that there's a couple of points that I will make. Right, one is how does the end user, what is made available to the end user, that gives them the capability to do things quite differently from whatever they did before. And there's a couple of experiences in that, consumer and business. The fibre-based technology is where a lot of the investment goes, but I will say HFC has also picked this up as well, and there's a number of HFC, like my home HFC can now go to gig.
So do I.
Yeah, so that's a thumbs up. But in the labs, we're also looking at how we start to ratchet up capacity to 10 gig when it comes to our fibre proposition. Behind the scenes, I think the sort of speeds and bandwidth that you're talking about is more about the backbones between carriers and our POIs.
No, I'm thinking just access. So the passive optical network, like you are speaking now about 10, I guess, is 10 gigabit PON probably. Mm-hmm. Because what I've read on your plan was speaking about a 1 gigabit PON. So I was just curious to see what is your roadmap to upgrade the system? And then another question.
There is a roadmap to 10 gig though, David. So that is in the labs.
So, and I might even comment on that, Andrew. I mean, one of the things that people often don't appreciate is there's a connection. And once upon a time, we used the copper and we would get 2,400 bits per second, which is 2.4K, which is 0.002 megabits. And over time, scientists and technologists worked out better and better ways to use that copper. And fibre is the same, except that we're starting out at a gigabit. And there's already, methods being used in research labs to talk about terabits over these pieces of fibre. And I guess David's question was around these little radios or laser transmitters at the other end. By rolling the fibre out, by businesses implementing fibre, you are future-proofing yourself. Today, you might only use 100 megabits, but you can readily dial that up to gigabits. And we heard from Scott O'Brien, I think it was last week, talking about AR and VR and telepresence. We're seeing a massive explosion in the amount of data and the richness of data, the immersiveness of data. And just yesterday, I was watching a BBC archive video from, I think it was 1983, talking about the CD-ROM. And the CD-ROM would store 560 megabits of information. And that was enough to keep 100 books, a whole encyclopedia set of information. But today, that's not how we're interacting with information. We're wanting to touch it, feel it, see it, maybe even in the future, smell it. So, David, undoubtedly within these POIs and these last mile networks, the NBN is looking to some of these technologies.
Well, I mean, if he says they're upgrading now, the 10 gigabit PON is the right move. I mean, then we can enjoy the gigabit speed. Of course, you need to have the fiber to the premise to do that. And but then I have another question, quick, if you allow me, to Andrew, is about the 5G deployment, because I see from the internet, so the CMA website, you can see that you are currently testing 5G fixed wireless access. I'd like to understand from you how you're going to complement your services with the 5G as well. If you can share this information, would be great.
Well, you know, so we definitely had this, and we've had the spectrum for a while, right? So for 5G, I think, look, I'll put it a couple of ways. You're on the money with your wording, though. This is a complementary service at the end of the day, right? I often get asked, why wouldn't I just go 5G over an existing infrastructure? And the answer to that is that you just cannot beat terrestrial infrastructure for bandwidth, particularly as we move into next year. And part of the rollout and the announcement was that for a customer that goes for a high bandwidth, I'm talking higher than 100 meg, for example, capacity residential, that we'll actually upgrade them to fibre in the home as well, right? So there is something, you know, it's $3.4 billion of investment that's going to be made over the next couple of years in this program, right? 5G sits up sort of over the top of that, and we're sort of like pushing the bubble a little bit. 5G's got a smaller, you know, circle of reference when it comes to how it goes. You need to roll out more towers and more space for it. But we're, you know, at the moment, I don't have all of the detail. All I know is that we're just considering how we might use it off the back end of our towers, but also how it might be used more centrally to either complement the existing telcos and what they offer, or create another a lower barrier to entry for telcos to come through. Because remember, we're the wholesaler. So as we implement stuff like this, what it means is that another provider can come in over the top and creates competition, which brings down price, which also makes it more accessible. So I think our strategy is more about how do we drop the barriers for entry and allow competition to come into the country so that others can then start to innovate off the back end of it instead of controlling all of that bandwidth for themselves.
So to change the tone a bit, I can see one of our guest panelists here is Jeff Pryor. Jeff is a technology, teacher. He teaches people about managing their time. Jeff, how's your experience been with COVID and the shift to work from home and engaging with your clients?
Thanks, Guy, and hi, everybody. Can you hear me all right? Is that right? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'm still, my head's still spinning with all the acronyms, all right? So, because I'm not a tech, whilst I show people how to use software, I'm not a techno, yeah, you know, you get it. So, but COVID has affected me, as Guy is alluding to, in that, so I live in Wodonga, but most of my training has been around, as it turns out, time management, but using a lot of Microsoft products. So Microsoft OneNote, Outlook, and Teams now, and things like that. So, but all how to become more effective at managing your time. So it's not just technology for technology's sake. So, but since COVID, of course, hit, I just had to transition everything online. So I was traveling to Melbourne every week, doing my training with, and then I had an office in Melbourne, coming back on the weekends here. And so then I had to shift everything online, which was a bit of an experience. And so been quite amazing, really, because now I'm sitting here and my office is now here. I usually have a stand up sort of thing. I'm not standing up today, but so for me, this has been fantastic. Now I'm working from home. I've had a home office for quite some time. I'm interested to see how this would impact me. I can see it's definitely going to. I've been very fortunate. I'm only on a residential plan, 50 of which I get when I check that speed test. I think I do that a lot, guys. I'm probably, you know, up in that sort of. I get like 35 down and 12 up, something like that. So, but that's sufficed. Actually, I've been very fortunate, but I'm conscious that it's not going to probably cut the mustard in the future. So I guess my question might be, as a user, how this might impact me and benefit me, perhaps.
Yeah, so appreciate that, Jeff. And it's just an example of, you know, small businesses being able to leverage the NBN. And if you hadn't had that, if you think back to being, you know, in an ADSL one world, there's no way you could have delivered your courses online from where you sit right now. No. And I think that's been even when we talk fibre to the node, or, you know, I live in a place where we've got fixed wireless, and sure, it's got some room for improvement, but I was still able to conduct meetings and participate in business from where I sat. And I think that is the key thing, that we don't realise how much bandwidth we've got today versus what we had even 10 years ago. And I think we need to remember that it's going to change again in the next 5 or 10, and it's important that we are adapting and preparing for that. Like Andrew said, preparedness for pandemics. Really, pandemic is just another form of natural interruption that you don't control. So Craig, I see you had a question. Take the mic and shoot.
Sure. So it's probably just what you were just talking about then. I'm kind of curious how, so I live regionally, and I'm sure Ben and Guy will attest to this, is how you're going to address some of these like fringe areas. So I'm in Orange in central west New South Wales. And if you go, there's a couple of parts of town here where there's some really awesome businesses, but the internet's rubbish, right? Like it's literally rubbish. And they're 5Ks from town, right? So I'm wondering how that's sort of being looked at. Obviously it's awesome that in town we're going to get great internet and super fast, but some of these really cool businesses that could greatly benefit from these services are only just a little bit on the edge of town. And we're not the only towns like this. I'm sure down in Albury and Wodonga area, you guys have got similar experiences. Bright, it's a good example. I've been down to Bright and I know what it's like there. So how's I guess the fixed wireless stuff going to be improved? And, you know, is there a bit of a roadmap there?
There's a couple of things there, Craig, which is really, again, exciting, right? So in that overall $3.45 billion, there's also another $50 million for co-development that's been allocated, and we have been approached across the board by councils and economic development groups within communities to identify sites. And look, I think it's going to be a collaborative build thing when we come to it, where, look, you do the first thing to start with, which is to roll out what you can as quickly as you can so that the broader community can grab it. But there's always going to be missing spots that don't quite fit the map. And, you know, so it doesn't stop at where it's at the moment. And in fact, some of the fixed wireless sites on the fringe have been included in the enterprise Ethernet zones, right? So it's not just totally the fixed footprint. There is a little bit of capacity that's been built for zero cost build on the very fringe that might still be fixed wireless. You know, it won't be 5K out of town, because I can tell you I've seen the quotes for Tech Choice and fibre builds for 5K, and it's a significant amount of money, right? However, we are looking to invest, and it's co-invest with councils that say we've got an industrial estate that would be worthy of the build, and we will look to actually do that build with them and get the clearances we need to actually make that happen. So it doesn't stop at the first part of the announcement. There's a lot more coming down the track that will facilitate what you're saying there, Craig, for business. It's an extraordinary announcement, I've got to tell you. It's one of those things where, you know, it's a jaw-dropping moment because of the amount of money that's going to be invested in this country to actually build out fibre. And at the same time, also do the same for the users to give them more capacity. Can I make a quick point, Guy? You know, your earlier point is really important about the fibre to the node situation. We've been nailed for that. I've seen it happen where, you know, people were saying, look, you know, why didn't you go fibre all the way? And it is what it is when it came to the decisions the government needed to make to roll out this infrastructure as quickly as it could in a cost-effective fashion. I've seen situations, and what it does is just moved the distance from the exchange closer to the premise. But, you know, customers that were over 500 metres weren't getting the full 140. You know, more likely to get 50/20, and those that were sitting over 600 metres or 750 metres were getting down to the 25/5s and 25/10s. This captures that now, right, and facilitates a build for fibre that takes it right into their business. And we've managed the overs and unders in this space to say, look, it doesn't matter. If you're in that fixed footprint, we'll do it for you, right? And you've got business grade capacity. I know of one customer that was, even though they were running on DSL, you know, 1210 or, you know, whatever it is, 12.1 or 2510, that was running at dial-up speed because of the distance from the exchange. They couldn't do anything about cloud or backing up the services or information. Putting them on a 50/20 was a game changer. just to get them into the cloud. But my perspective at the moment is even 50/20s and 140 services feel like they're not enough at the moment based on the way information and movement of information is accelerating. And to the other point, you know, a residential service is good to start with. It's a game changer if I'm going 4 times or 8 times the speed I had before. But the newer applications that are coming in and the way we're expected to present ourselves to customers, I think is stepping it up into another place, right? Which is give me the ability to go to 50 or 200, and ease my way into these more, you know, richer environments, so I can sell my business, but also transact in a different place and sell my IP, not just around Australia, but around the world. Right. So it just feels like even the 50/20s, 140 services don't feel like they're enough for business anymore. And it's this next step change into give me some capacity that I can dial up or indeed dial down. A quick point for you all, right? Fibre is a soft change, right? You know, so the NTD and the modem are out there. I've seen fibre connections go from one speed to the other within minutes of the order being placed with the NBN. I'm talking literally 3 minutes after the order was received, the system upgraded the service to a higher bandwidth. So when it's in, right, it becomes a game changer for the ability to build out capacity as long as your router can handle the speed. And that's where I think the next steps of investments are going to be. Better routers, that move Wi-Fi more effectively, interact with mobility in a better way, but also then allow for this, you know, universal communications like Teams and all the other stuff we're using.
I think you head towards a very important point there, Andrew, and that is, like, you can have the best fuel in the world. You can put rocket fuel in a car, and it's not necessarily going to go any faster, or it's not necessarily going to, you know, cope with that. Or you can put a bigger carburetor on a vehicle. Just because you've got a bigger carburetor doesn't mean it'll go faster. So I was going to throw over to Ben in a moment, but I think the key here for everyone is you need to be getting quality advice. You need to have fit for purpose equipment. There is a limit. And again, I was watching a video archive from BBC talking about 8-bit and 16-bit and 32-bit processors and the failings in the past where people didn't have a bus fast enough to take advantage of those processors. What you're talking about is the converse, where you've got more speed in the pipe, but if the equipment attached to the end of it can't cope with that speed, it may not be worth it. What I wanted to do, there's many things we could talk about, but Ben, I wonder if we could throw over to you. You know, Reconnect's been, I guess, you know, supporting businesses in the Albury, Wodonga and greater regions, dealing with these, what do they call it, challenges of distance and connectivity. What's an example or two you've had in the past year or so where Reconnect's helped a business change its operation and really bring it into the digital world?
Yeah, and look, I mean, I got a good example for a customer that probably began some, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, when a customer came to us with challenges of wanting to operate a business from a regional area. So this customer's some 5 kilometres out of Gindra, so, you know, in regional New South Wales. And they were had a very lacklustre ADSL service and wanting to operate a quite sizable helicopter maintenance flying school, as well as you know, firefighting and rural use of helicopters. A company called Forest Air Helicopters, and they were literally just over 5 kilometres from the telephone exchange. So their ADSL was quite lacklustre. So at the time, we worked with those guys and got them quite quickly onto the NBN fixed wireless solution. And look, for them, you know, going on to fixed wireless was an amazing change. They you know, they sort of increased their bandwidth by some, you know, 20 times, you know, or at least 15 times, and it was massive change. But now, you know, some 3, 4, 5 years later, and especially now with COVID, they're finding that their fixed wireless is obviously hitting the straps and not delivering what their demands of their network is, and their technology requirements in general, whether it be voice and data and the like, handling some quite large mapping files and things. So, you know, these guys now have engaged us as part of these, fibre upgrade options and things. And we're looking at, sites for them to now go and build a new hangar, and obviously Albury Airport fits the bill for the, the new fibre enterprise upgrades. But even in the meantime, we've actually been able to find some, fibre connected sites that were, some kilometres away, but then look at microwave technologies to act as a bit of a band-aid fix until we can get them, some better solutions, into the future. But these guys now, looking at multi-million-dollar investment, once again just chasing those higher bandwidth connections. The Ethernet, basically you got no contention. You're not out there. You're swimming laps in that uncontended pool. There's no one to run into. So certainly make a big difference.
Excellent. Well, we are coming up towards the hour, and as has been with all of these sessions, we're happy to have the conversation or the questions tickle on afterwards. But Andrew, I would like to really thank you and others that have come on here as part of a panel or a bit of a discussion, for sharing your view and your vision of what's going on with the NBN. I think there's no doubt, just like when we shifted to mobile technology, you can't have perfect coverage everywhere all the time straight away. And I think that what you were sharing today about the Business Fibre initiative and the 240 zones where a vast majority of businesses in Australia will be able to connect via fibre is a great step forwards. I think Craig raised the point of what is going to happen on those fringe areas, places where there are fixed wireless, where there may be some, backhaul contention, and it'd be great if you can share with us, and we'll share out via our channels the maps and the zones. I know with the Business Fibre launch for Albury Wodonga, that was shared at the event. I would encourage anyone that's watching this to look up and see if there's an event being launched in your region, or we'll share that. Andrew, did you have any closing remarks or comments that you'd like to share with us?
Look, my only request, and look, thank you. I think, look, there's a couple of things. One is that I'll leave you with one comment that came from Jeff Whitten at Orange when he spoke to me about being on a fixed wireless location and the effect it had just on a personal level. So people will go, oh, I'm on fixed wireless. His son at 16 couldn't communicate based on the older technology that he had. It became a game changer when his boy could actually get and socialise, play a few games, interact with Facebook and YouTube and all the rest of it, and actually stay at home and get educated because he lives outside of town. Never underestimate the power of technology on the culture and the people as well. I think that's what we're going to see going forward as well, as people get access to this stuff, and broader and more remote communities are starting to use and feel a part of what we're all doing at the end of the day. My call to action is that, we're spending quite a bit of effort getting the message out. You as consultants and individuals that are talking to business, please bring it up. Let customers know that they're, as an empowered and informed individual, they can make some great choices. And to your earlier point, I always recommend talk to your advisor, the person that knows your business better than anybody else, about what you can use it for. And then, also, how can I... There's three, I'll give you my quick definition of a value proposition. Enlightenment, right? Telling someone that they didn't know something, what they didn't know in the past, right? So enlightening somebody on an idea. Innovation, how you apply that idea to that person's business. And facilitation. I can make arrangements so you can get what you're looking for. If I can't do it myself, I can facilitate that for you and put you in touch with people. Those three have always held me in good stead. If I can give you a great idea, apply it to your business so you can see the value, and then facilitate the outcome, you've got the trifecta. And customers will come to you for all sorts of things after that because they see you as someone that cares about how they move forward. So my ask is please communicate. Get the word out there, let businesses know that we've got something to offer, and then, work on the trifecta: enlightenment, innovation, facilitation. And if you need help, ask.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And again, what a great way to end talking about possibility, because that's what AWISE is all about, is bringing together enthusiasm and ideas and looking at how we can adapt and use these new technologies to improve our lives, particularly in regional Australia. Now, a gratuitous plug for our sponsors, particularly the Victorian Government and the Digital Innovation Futures. I'm really pleased to have had Victor Purton along for the journey, and he's the Chief Optimism Officer for the Centre for Optimism. But thank you so much to all of our supporters. Thank you very much to the NBN for coming along today to share what's happening. I'm looking forward to 2021. A lot of people talk about 2020 as being a terrible year, but I've listened to many people talk about how they've had the opportunity to spend more time with family, get out into the gardens, you know, read that book, and yet somehow we've still all been able to carry on working. No doubt there's been some challenges for people, but I'm very much looking forward to 2021. I'm looking forward to how we can all choose to adopt these technologies and innovate, but still lead to having a more optimistic and brighter future. So thank you everyone again for joining us. Feel free to those that want to stick around and ask a few more questions of Andrew or Ben, and all the best.